Aaron Rodgers had a first yesterday. It was the first time as the Jets quarterback he faced another team. It was one of those scrimmages against the Carolina Panthers, who have a pretty good front seven. Not great, but pretty good. And the offensive line for the Jets was a problem. Bryce Young was up and down the field. Aaron Rodgers, 2-minute drill, 3 and out, and ugly. Not good. But, of course, this offensive line is being duct taped. Billy Turner here, Max Williams there, Mekhi Becton's kind of a bust. Dwayne Brown is hurt. So Aaron can smile at the Tonys and on HBO and at the Knicks game, and it looked like fun. I was happy for him. But he'll get a little prickly when things start to emerge that he's not used to. The Green Bay Packers in 20 years, I do not ever recall them going into a season with a duct-taped offensive line. According to PFF, the last decade in Green Bay, Aaron's offensive lines, none were below average. Many were top 10. The Jets is now ranked at 23rd going into the season. And they are piecemealing it up front on the edges. They don't have a tackle. So the Packers have their flaws. Those are well documented on this show. But in terms of drafting and stability and development and coaching and organizationally, Green Bay's an excellent franchise, very much in the Patriots-Steelers realm. So essentially, Aaron Rodgers, because these are all companies, right? Aaron left a really well-run company for a poorly run company, the Jets, that in the last decade has finished in last place 7 times in a decade. Multiple quarterbacks, multiple coaches, multiple GMs, impulsive owners. So Aaron has graduated too. And this is why I keep mentioning his age yesterday, today, the day before. Aaron has graduated out of running. He no longer is going to buy you time. You have to give him time. And it's different. And it is my number one concern for the Jets this year. I've said it over and over, ad nauseum. O-line, older quarterback, no longer buying you a lot of time. He wants to get rid of that puppy and get out of there. So Aaron experienced what his predecessors did. Sam Darnold, Zach Wilson, Mike White. The Jets can't figure out up front on the offensive side. Now, there is talent in the building in New York. Robert Saleh, Joe Douglas, the GM, Garrett Wilson, the receiver. Sauce Gardner's phenomenal. A lot of nice pieces. Breece Hall and Aaron Rodgers. But he is viewed as their savior because they've whiffed on their last 2 quarterback picks. Green Bay doesn't really whiff on quarterback picks. Jordan Love could be the first. I doubt he's a huge whiff. But if you just look at the quarterback position, last 15 years, Jets have had like 15 starting quarterbacks. Essentially, Green Bay had 1 and a handful of guys that would fill in if Aaron went down with a couple collarbone injuries. But it was 1 quarterback basically for 15 years starting the game. So Aaron entered a building that at coach and quarterback, the 2 most important positions, has been swimming in chaos for 10 years. And these are all just companies. That's what they are. Green Bay is a well-run company, never in chaos, rarely in the news except for winning. And the Jets are almost always in the news for the wrong stuff. And what's really concerning about this, and that's why I do think Buffalo minus 1.5 is one of my favorite bets in the first week, is when you look at the instability, and Aaron lived through it yesterday at tackle where they couldn't protect against Carolina. The early schedule for the Jets is Buffalo, great pass rush, New England, Cowboys, Philadelphia, Chris Jones of the Chiefs, probably back by then at Denver. So the weakness is the strength of many of the teams early in that schedule. Aaron lived the real Jets quarterback life yesterday. Running 3 and out, uncomfortable, not good on the edges. This franchise is a Dwayne Brown injury at left tackle from being a mess. And Aaron talked about the joint practice with Carolina and if he's worried about the offensive line chemistry going forward.
A lot of that worry about guys playing next to each other, because when it comes down to it, the center's making calls, I'm making calls, they're making calls between each other. It helps. You know, we had some great ones that played over the years in Green Bay next to each other for a long time, but that's the exception usually. Usual for the NFL is there's going to be multiple starting offensive lineups throughout the year because of injuries or guys they think can play that aren't starting right away. So we'll figure it out.
But he acknowledged it. Aaron acknowledged it. Green Bay was the exception every year. Top offensive lines. How many times have we mentioned it on the show? So he went from a company with no chaos, although some was self-created, and excellent support and protection, to a circus he now has to save. Yesterday was his first dose of reality, and it got uncomfortable, like it did for Darnold and Zach Wilson. All right, so the Cowboys camp's just up the road from here, about an hour and a half away. The story has been early, wow, the Cowboys look really good defensively, and, man, Dak's throwing a lot of picks again. Now, Mark Sanchez was on our show yesterday, and he said, I wouldn't get too worried about it.
Listen, you don't want your quarterback throwing interceptions. However, I will say in training camp, especially the first week and a half-ish, the defense is so far ahead. Their calls are, half the verbiage, if not less, maybe a quarter of the verbiage of the offense. And it's just go play, run, hit, and tackle.
Now, we're not in the first week, though. We're now in the second week and the third week, and games start now tonight. So there's a clear correlation with Dak. This is not something we're going to argue over. It's just the facts. When you ask Dak Prescott the day he stepped into the league, the more you ask him to do, the more mistakes he makes. The best, most efficient year for Dak Prescott, believe it or not, was year one. Zeke was the best running back in the league. The offensive line was the best running offensive line in the league. And Dak was on the cheap. You could fill holes. He didn't cost anything. The Cowboys had the number 2 rush offense. And by year 2, we knew the truth. Because Zeke in year 2 was suspended 6 games. And in those 6 games, Dak had 5 touchdown passes and 7 picks and a 76 passer rating. Dak's only been to 2 Pro Bowls. And in both years he's been to a Pro Bowl, Zeke led the NFL in rushing attempts and rushing yards. Last year, Dak's numbers, 15 picks led the league, and he missed 4 starts. And a passer rating of 91. That was worse than Daniel Jones. Why? Because Zeke was a shot fighter, and the offensive line was in a rebuild. You needed more from Dak. So in this training camp, Zeke's not around. Brandon Cooks is new. Tony Pollard off a broken leg. O-line still in a bit of a rebuild. Zach Martin holding out. Dak once again heavy on the turnovers. There is a clear correlation. This is not arguable. His most efficient year was the year they needed him to do the least. So you keep telling me Dak's the front man of a great band, and every time he's out in front by himself, there's no hits, right? So Shady McCoy said the interceptions, no big deal, maybe.
I think a veteran quarterback of his magnitude of America's team, the Cowboys, and I think a lot of people feel like Dak's a elite quarterback, franchise guy. So I think it is something. I mean, the good thing is that it's at camp and you try to work the kinks out, new offense, get the picks out now. But, I mean, I won't be super worried about it, but I think coming off a year he's had where he's been throwing picks, it may be something.
Yes, last year he led the league in picks with a number 1 receiver, with 2 running backs, Zeke and Tony Pollard, with an offensive coach, with a workable schedule. The NFC's never been weaker, and he led the NFL in picks and had a 91 passer rating. It is something. It's okay. Say this about kids all the time. Some kids in the family, you can pile stuff on. Some kids you can't. That's fine. But there is a clear correlation, and we saw the truth in year 2. When Zeke was pulled out and suspended, Dak was bad. And so last year, Zeke's kind of a shot fighter, rebuild O-line. Gallup wasn't quite ready to play early. A lot of interceptions. I don't think it's everything, but I say often on the show, everything's something. Nothing is everything. But when the other two quarterbacks in the preseason that are throwing lots of picks are Jimmy Garoppolo and Baker Mayfield, there does seem to be kind of a pattern. Baker has led the league in picks since he entered it, the entire league, and Garoppolo has been known to uncork a few beauties as well. All right, good stuff today. Shady McCoy made some news on the show yesterday when he was talking about Eric Bieniemy.